Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought to yourself, what just happened there? Maybe you felt talked over, dismissed, or like your voice didn't matter, even though you had every intention of being kind, clear, and respectful. The older we get, the more we value peace, clarity, and connection. And yet somehow difficult people seem to keep showing up. At family gatherings, doctors' offices, in group chats, even at church. They interrupt. They judge. They push your buttons. And at this stage in life, the last thing you want is to waste energy on someone who drains it. But here's the truth. Difficult people aren't going away. And sometimes we can't just cut them out. They might be our children, our siblings, neighbors, or someone we care about deeply. So, what can we do? How do we hold our ground, keep our dignity, and maybe even earn their respect without becoming cold, bitter, or aggressive? That's what we're going to talk about today. In this video, I want to share something more powerful than clever comebacks or arguments you'll never win. This is about understanding how to carry yourself with confidence, calm, and clarity, so that even the most difficult person can feel your strength and maybe even mirror it. Let's start with something that might surprise you. The most powerful thing you can bring into a tough conversation isn't dominance, it's warmth. You see, a lot of people think confidence means being loud, forceful, or getting the last word. But real confidence doesn't come from trying to impress others. It comes from being real, being you. It's when who you are inside matches, how you show up on the outside. You've probably been around someone who just felt off, even if you couldn't explain why. They spoke a little too quickly. Their smile didn't feel quite genuine. They laughed too loud or talked too much. Something about it just didn't sit right. That's usually because they were trying too hard to be someone they're not. And whether we're 16 or 66, people can smell that kind of performance from a mile away. But the opposite is also true. When someone walks into a room with calm energy, holds steady eye contact, and speaks slowly and clearly, without rushing or over-explaining, it's magnetic. That kind of presence isn't pushy. It's powerful. And it earns respect without ever having to ask for it. So if you want to carry yourself with quiet authority, think less about what you say and more about how you say it. Keep your shoulders relaxed but upright. Look people in the eye. Slow down your words. Let there be pauses between your thoughts. These aren't gaps to be filled. They're moments that create gravity. People lean in when there's space to breathe. I know, especially for those of us who grew up during a time when speaking up wasn't always encouraged, especially for women. This may feel unfamiliar. But you've earned the right to take up space. Your voice has weight, and you don't need to raise it to make it heard. Now let's say you've got something difficult to say, maybe to your grown child or a close friend who's been crossing boundaries. You don't want to cause a fight, but you also can't keep swallowing your truth. So how do you start that kind of conversation? It begins with setting the frame. Most arguments spin out of control because they have no direction, no boundaries, and no time limit. It's like two people getting into a car and saying, "Let's drive." But nobody decides where they're going. So they just go in circles, get frustrated, and eventually crash into something. Instead, before the conversation even begins, you can set the tone by saying something like, "I want to talk to you about something important to me. It'll only take about 10 minutes, and I want to make sure we both feel heard." Just like that, you've defined the topic, the goal, and the time frame. No surprises, no power plays, just a clear direction. If emotions are running high, one powerful tool is to give each person 5 minutes to speak without interruption. It might feel awkward at first, but it works. You set a timer, and the first person talks. The other one listens. No eye rolls, no rebuttals, no side comments. Then you switch. 5 minutes each. Once it's done, you pause. Maybe take a breath, maybe take a walk. You'd be surprised how much clarity you get just from being fully heard and fully hearing. Now here's something else I've learned. The way we speak matters just as much as what we say. And I'm not just talking about the tone of voice, though that matters too. I'm talking about how intelligent and respectful you sound, even if you're just talking about what's for dinner. You don't need a college degree or fancy vocabulary to sound wise. All you need is intention. And that starts with cutting back on those little filler words. The, like, you know, and I guess. That sneak into our speech when we're nervous or unsure. They don't make you sound polite, they make you sound unsure. And you're not unsure. You've lived enough life to know what you want to say. The secret is to replace those fillers with silence. A simple pause. Let the sentence land. Let the listener catch up. Silence isn't awkward. It's powerful. It shows that your words have weight and that you're not rushing to fill the air just to feel heard. Also, the way you start a sentence matters. Instead of leading with, "Sorry to bother you," try, "Do you have a moment to talk?" Instead of, "I hate to bring this up, but," say, "There's something on my mind I'd like to share." These little changes add up. They tell the other person, "I respect you, but I also respect myself." So many of us have been conditioned to shrink ourselves to keep the peace. But peace doesn't come from staying silent. It comes from knowing how to speak up in a way that's calm, kind, and clear. And when we carry ourselves this way, with steady eyes, warm words, and a calm voice, something shifts. The people who used to talk over us start to listen. The ones who used to test our limits begin to notice we're not so easily shaken. And over time, that quiet consistency builds something deeper than fear or control. It builds respect. Not everyone will change, of course. Some people are just difficult, period. But when you change the way you show up, they don't have the same power over you anymore. You start to lead the conversation, not by dominating, but by grounding it. And that's where the real strength lies. So much of handling difficult people isn't about what they say or do. It's about how we respond. And the key to responding well begins before we ever speak a word. One of the most powerful things I've learned over the years is this: let your breath be the first thing you offer, not your defense, not your anger, not your rebuttal, just a breath. Because in that one breath, you take back control. Imagine someone says something that feels like a jab. Maybe they're criticizing you unfairly, making a rude comment at dinner, or twisting your words in front of others. The temptation is to fire back, to defend yourself right away. But when you do that, when you snap or shout or start talking over them, you've already lost your balance. And now the conversation becomes a battle. But if you breathe first, just pause for a moment, you send a signal not only to them, but to yourself. I am in control here, not of them, but of you. And that's where your true power lies. Think of it like this: not every ball that's thrown your way has to be caught. Not every comment deserves a reply. Some things are best left on the floor. You're not playing tennis. You don't need to hit back every time. That's especially true when someone is trying to provoke you. Maybe it's an adult child who knows exactly what to say to make you feel guilty, or a neighbor who constantly pushes your boundaries. When you engage right away, they've already won, because now you're playing their game. But you don't have to play. You can let their words fall. Not in silence because you're weak, but in silence because you're strong. There's a saying I love: you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. And isn't that the truth? People with real self-respect know when to speak and when to stay silent. They don't need to win the fight because they know what they're protecting is more important: their peace, their dignity, their energy. But this doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means responding with intention, not reaction. One of the most effective tools you can use in these moments is something called tactical empathy. That's just a fancy term for understanding the other person's feelings, even if you don't agree with them. Let's say someone lashes out at you with something like, "You always make me feel small when you talk that way in front of others." Instead of defending yourself with, "That's not what I said," or "You're too sensitive," try something like, "Sounds like that really didn't sit well with you," or even just mirror what they said. In front of others? What you're doing is gently pulling more out of them instead of shutting them down. And most of the time, people just want to feel heard, not fixed, not corrected, just heard. You don't have to agree with them to show empathy. You're not saying they're right. You're saying, "I'm listening." And in difficult conversations, that's often enough to lower the walls. Another helpful shift? Instead of saying, "You can't talk to me that way," try, "I don't allow people to speak to me that way." You see the difference? One is reactive, defensive. The other is calm, grounded. You're stating a boundary, not throwing a punch. And speaking of boundaries, if there's one thing we often learn too late in life, it's that setting boundaries is not rude. It's healthy. It's respectful, both to others and to ourselves. Imagine a painting without a frame. The colors might be beautiful, but they're spilling all over the place. There's no structure, no shape. A boundary is simply the frame that says, "This is where I begin and end. This is what I accept. This is what I won't." And if someone tries to cross that frame with criticism, manipulation, guilt, or disrespect, you don't have to fight them. You don't have to prove your worth. You simply stand where you are and let them know, "I'm not available for that kind of treatment." That kind of calm clarity earns far more respect than shouting ever will. Sometimes someone will say something hurtful, maybe even intentionally cruel, and you may feel it hit right in the chest. But instead of going toe-to-toe, here's what you can do. If it's someone close to you, and you believe the relationship can withstand a little vulnerability, you might say, "Was that meant to be hurtful, or were you trying to be funny?" That kind of question gives them a chance to check themselves without you having to scold them. But if the relationship isn't close or you don't feel safe saying much, silence can be even more powerful. Let their words hang in the air. Don't rush to fill the space. After a few seconds, you can simply repeat what they said back to them. "That sounded stupid to you?" Just like that, calm, slow, not sarcastic, and then wait. What usually happens? They backpedal, they soften, or they explain themselves. Either way, you didn't lose your dignity. That's the kind of response that builds a quiet authority. The kind that doesn't shout, but doesn't shrink either. And if you've ever felt tempted to match someone's energy, to one-up them in a fight to get in that last dig, take a moment and ask yourself, what do I actually want right now? Do you want to win, or do you want peace? Because there's a secret most people don't know. Winning the argument almost always means losing the connection. You might get the last word, but at what cost? Resentment, distance, regret. The person who wins an argument often walks away lonelier than they were before. And that's not the kind of victory anyone wants, especially in family relationships or long-term friendships. Instead, you can let go of the need to win. You can choose to respond with clarity, not cruelty. You can decide that your peace matters more than being right. And when you do, when you pause, breathe, and hold your ground with kindness, you change the dynamic of every room you walk into. You're no longer reacting to difficult people. You're leading them. And that, my friend, is a beautiful kind of power. There's something powerful about knowing you don't have to say everything that crosses your mind. You don't have to fill every silence. You don't have to respond to every jab. And you certainly don't have to match someone else's tone just because they're having a bad day. That's not suppression, that's wisdom. But wisdom doesn't mean silence forever. There comes a time when you do need to speak. Maybe someone's crossed a line, said something offensive, or treated you in a way you simply won't accept. When that happens, how you carry yourself matters just as much, if not more, than the words you choose. Let's talk about body language for a moment. Have you ever been in a room with someone who didn't say much, but still commanded respect? They didn't raise their voice. They didn't interrupt. They just sat there with quiet confidence, chin up, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. That's what presence looks like. That's what makes people take notice, without you saying a word. One of the quickest ways to signal strength and clarity in conversation is simply to sit or stand with intention. Your posture speaks before your voice ever does. When you look someone in the eyes, not to intimidate, but to connect, it tells them, I see you. I'm not afraid to be seen either. If direct eye contact feels too intense, especially in emotional conversations, here's a little trick. Look at the space between their eyebrows. They'll still feel your attention, but you'll feel less pressure. You can also practice softening your face, a slight smile, a relaxed brow. These cues don't make you weak, they make you approachable. And in difficult conversations, approachability is half the battle. Because here's the truth, most people don't want to fight. They just want to be heard. And when your body language tells them, I'm here, I'm listening, the energy starts to shift. Even simple things like keeping your arms open instead of crossed, leaning slightly forward instead of back, they signal openness. They say, I'm not here to attack. I'm here to talk. Now, you might be wondering, what happens when you're not sure if the person you're talking to is being genuine? Maybe they're nodding along, saying the right things, but something just doesn't feel right. You can't always put your finger on it, but you feel like they're faking it, trying to get something out of you, or playing nice just to manipulate the situation. When that happens, don't ignore your instincts. Most of us, especially at this stage in life, have finely tuned emotional radars. We've seen enough to know when someone's not being real. Trust that. One simple way to test someone's authenticity is to ask them to repeat what they just said. Not in a confrontational way, just calmly. Something like, can you say that again? If they struggle, if their voice shifts, or they suddenly sound unsure, that's usually a sign they were rehearsing something, not speaking from the heart. Another sign to look out for is forced laughter, over-explaining, or trying too hard to impress. People who are truly comfortable with themselves don't need to push. They don't need to perform, and neither do you. In fact, one of the greatest signs of strength is letting go of the need to be liked. That's a tough one, especially when it comes to family. We want to feel close. We want our children, or siblings, or friends to appreciate us. But when that desire becomes a need, it can lead us down a path of people-pleasing and self-abandonment. That's why self-respect matters so much in these conversations. It's the backbone that holds everything else together. When you respect yourself, you speak differently. You listen differently. You don't let people walk all over you. And you don't try to control them either. You simply show up, fully you, and let the relationship adjust to meet you there. That means you might not always agree with the other person, and that's okay. You can say something like, "I see it differently," or "That's not how I remember it." Those phrases are like anchors. They hold your truth steady without pulling the other person under. If someone keeps pushing, trying to twist your words or change your story, just stay grounded. You don't need to jump from topic to topic trying to defend yourself. You can simply say, "That's not how I see it," and let it stand. It's like being the only one in a room who doesn't rise when the music gets louder. You're not being passive. You're being immovable. Now, there's something else that comes up often, especially in family dynamics, and that's the fear that speaking up will damage the relationship. That if you tell someone how you really feel, they'll leave, get angry, or pull away. That fear is valid. But silence has a cost too. One way to soften the fear, for both sides, is to frame the conversation with love. Before you dive in, say something like, "I want to talk about something important, but I want you to know that nothing changes how much I care about you." Just that one sentence can drop the defenses and make the conversation feel safer. Another helpful practice: give the conversation a time limit. "Can we talk about this for 10 minutes? That way, no one feels trapped. And when time is up, you can decide together whether to keep going or pause and come back later. These simple tools, a loving frame, clear time, open body language, calm tone, they may sound small, but they create the kind of space where real connection can happen. Because here's the bottom line: difficult people don't always change. But when you change how you handle them, everything gets lighter. You stop carrying the weight of resentment. You stop trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. You start standing in your own value, not to prove anything, but because it's who you are. And that, over time, earns the kind of respect that doesn't need to be demanded, because it's already understood. So if you've ever left a conversation feeling drained, disrespected, or dismissed, I want to remind you of something important. You are not powerless. You are not too old to change how you relate to others. In fact, your age is your advantage. You have experience, perspective, and the right to peace. You've spent decades building your life, your character, and your wisdom. Don't let anyone, no matter how loud or difficult, take that away from you in one heated moment. Speak with kindness. Move with calm. Protect your energy. And remember that just because someone else is chaotic doesn't mean you have to be. If this message spoke to you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your thoughts or even a story about a time you handled a tough situation with grace. I promise, someone else out there needs to hear it. And if you found this helpful, give the video a like. It helps more people see it. Don't forget to subscribe to Strong Elderly Life for more videos just like this, created especially for people like you who want to keep growing, healing, and thriving, no matter your age. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to be aggressive to be respected. All you have to do is stay rooted in who you are and let the world adjust. Here's to living with clarity, with courage, and above all, with grace.